Trey's first to act, he raises to 300. It folds to Doug in the big blind, who has ace-4 suited. It looks like he's thinking about 3-betting. Instead, he calls. We've got queen-10 suited in the under-the-gun straddle. At the moment, we have a tight image. I consider putting in a 3-bet squeeze. You can see it on my face that I'd like to do it. But when you're in the straddle and an early position player raises, followed by a big blind call, you're supposed to 3-bet queen-10 suited around 40% of the time. I elect to just flat and close the action. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes ace-9 deuce rainbow. We've got nothing except some backdoor draws. Doug checks his top pair. We check. Trey wants to rep the ace that Doug has. He bets 425. If Doug folds, my mind immediately goes towards the thought of check raising. Our hand isn't really good enough to call, but we have lots of cards that can help us on the turn. We can rep hands like sets of 9s and deuces, as well as ace-9 and ace-deuce. If Doug calls, I should just give up. But now that we're getting 4-1, and with my tight image to fall back on in case we're not able to make a hand, I can perhaps cash in on the credit that I have built up and get a bluff through if I see an opening later. I make a speculative call. With no real draws out there other than to the wheel, it should look like I've got at least a pair, if not a monster, given the fact that I've overcalled on a relatively dry board. The turn is the deuce of clubs, giving us the flush draw, and fake trips if we want to represent it. We're by far the most likely to be holding a deuce in our hand. If you go back to the chart, you see that we're supposed to be defending our straddle with all but 3 suited deuces. Doug checks, we check. Trey knows that the deuce is bad for him. He gives up and checks back. The bad news is that the river is the 9 of spades. We break the flush, but we'll have a lot of full houses and sometimes even quads. Doug checks. He knows that I'll often have at least an ace, if not something much stronger. I didn't flat with backdoor draws to have a perfect bluff opportunity fall into our lap and not take advantage of it. I bet 1200 into 2200. It should look like I'm trying to get called, and again, the only draw that missed is something like 5-4, so I'm going to have a monster a ton of the time. Trey folds his king high. Doug has a much tougher decision. He doesn't beat anything that I'd be betting for value, including some aces like ace-10, ace-jack, and maybe even sometimes ace-queen. Ultimately, Doug folds the best hand. You can't fault him for making the laydown. I took a strange line that I wouldn't necessarily always take if it weren't for some game flow factors at play.